Welcome to Trusting in the Lord, a channel sharing Jesus' teachings to help you live with peace, love, and strength. Today we explore worship, not as a ritual, not as a song, but as a way of living that places God at the center of everything we are. When many people hear the word worship, they think of church buildings, music, prayers, or sacred moments set apart from daily life. But Jesus revealed something far deeper. True worship is not confined to a place. It is not limited to words. It is not measured by volume or emotion. True worship flows from the heart. It is a posture of surrender, a life aligned with God's will, a daily offering of love, obedience, and trust. In this teaching, we will walk through 10 profound dimensions of worship as Jesus taught and lived it, and discover how worship transforms ordinary life into sacred ground. Chapter 1. Worship begins with the heart. Worship, as Jesus taught it, does not begin with sound, movement, or ritual. It begins in the hidden place of the heart. Long before words are spoken or songs are lifted, worship is already taking shape within a person's inner life. Jesus consistently drew attention away from outward appearances and redirected it toward the condition of the heart, because he knew that true devotion cannot be manufactured, it must be genuine. Many people believe they are worshiping simply because they participate in religious activities. They attend services, repeat prayers, and follow traditions. Yet Jesus warned that it is possible to honor God with lips while the heart remains far away. Worship without heart is empty, no matter how impressive it looks. God is not moved by performance. He is moved by sincerity. A worshiping heart is one that approaches God with honesty. It does not hide behind spiritual language or religious habits. It comes with gratitude when life is good and with trust when life is painful. Jesus showed that God welcomes hearts that are open, humble, and truthful, even when they are wounded or confused. In fact, those are often the hearts that worship most deeply. When worship begins in the heart, it reshapes intention. Instead of asking, "How do I appear?" the worshiper asks, "Am I aligned with God?" The focus shifts from external validation to internal surrender. Pride loses its hold, and humility takes its place. Fear begins to soften because the heart learns to rest in God rather than impress others. Jesus lived with a heart continually turned toward the Father. His worship was not limited to moments of prayer. It was reflected in his compassion, obedience, and unwavering trust. This teaches us that worship is not something we add to life. It is the posture from which life flows. When the heart is oriented toward God, worship becomes natural rather than forced. It is no longer an obligation but a response. And from that inner place, true worship begins. Chapter 2. Worship is not about a place. During Jesus' time, worship was deeply associated with specific locations. Temples, mountains, and sacred buildings were considered the only places where God could truly be honored. But Jesus challenged this belief and revealed a truth that transformed the understanding of worship forever. God is not confined to a place. Jesus taught that God is spirit, and therefore true worship is not dependent on geography. Worship is not limited to where you are standing. It is defined by who you are becoming. This teaching removed the barriers that separated sacred spaces from everyday life. Suddenly, worship was no longer restricted to holy ground. It could happen anywhere. This means worship is possible in moments of silence, in daily work, in quiet obedience, and even in suffering. A heart aligned with God does not need a building to worship. It needs awareness, surrender, and truth. Wherever you are, God is present. And where God is present, worship can rise. Jesus himself modeled this reality. He worshiped the Father while walking dusty roads, while serving others, while resting, and while facing opposition. His life declared that worship is not about where you go, but about how you live. Every moment became sacred because every moment was offered to God. When worship is freed from location, it becomes deeply personal. You no longer wait for the right environment to honor God. Instead, you carry worship with you. Your words, your choices, and your attitudes become expressions of devotion. This truth also brings comfort. It reminds us that God is not distant or inaccessible. He does not wait behind walls or rituals. He meets us where we are, at home, at work, in pain, or in joy. Worship then becomes a constant connection rather than a scheduled event. Chapter 3. Worship is a response to who God is. True worship is not rooted in what we receive from God, but in who God is. Jesus never treated worship as a transaction. He did not worship the Father to gain approval or blessings. Instead, his worship flowed naturally from love, reverence, and trust. When worship is based only on outcomes, it becomes unstable. Gratitude fades when circumstances change. Faith weakens when prayers seem unanswered. But Jesus taught that worship anchored in God's character remains firm, regardless of external conditions. God is holy, faithful, merciful, and unchanging. When we recognize these truths, worship becomes a response rather than a request. It rises from awe, not expectation, from reverence, not entitlement, from love, not fear. Jesus lived in constant awareness of the Father's goodness. Even in moments of hardship, he trusted God's wisdom and purpose. This kind of worship does not deny pain. It places pain within the larger reality of God's sovereignty. When worship flows from who God is, it deepens our faith. We learn to honor God not only when life is easy, but when life is uncertain. Worship becomes steady, grounded, and mature. This perspective frees us from conditional devotion. We no longer worship because life is favorable. We worship because God is worthy. And in that shift, worship becomes powerful, not because it changes God, but because it transforms us. Chapter 4. Worship requires humility. Jesus taught that true worship cannot exist without humility. Where pride is present, worship becomes distorted. Pride seeks recognition, control, and self-importance, while worship calls for surrender. For this reason, humility is not a secondary virtue in worship, it is its foundation. Humility in worship begins with an honest recognition of who God is and who we are. Jesus revealed that God is holy, sovereign, and all-knowing, while humanity is limited, dependent, and in need of grace. Worship invites us to accept this truth, not with shame, but with reverence. When we humble ourselves, we place God in his rightful position at the center of our lives. Jesus consistently modeled humility in his relationship with the Father. Though he possessed authority, he chose submission. Though he had power, he chose obedience. His worship was expressed through willingness to yield, not the desire to dominate. This teaches us that humility is not weakness, it is strength directed by trust. In worship, humility allows us to release the illusion of control. We stop insisting on our own understanding and begin to trust God's wisdom. We acknowledge that our plans are limited, but God's purpose is complete. This posture opens the heart, making room for God's guidance and presence. Humility also purifies worship by removing comparison. We no longer measure our devotion against others. We stop striving to appear more spiritual. Worship becomes personal, honest, and sincere. It is no longer about image, but about alignment. Jesus taught that those who humble themselves will be lifted up. In worship, this lifting is not about status, but about closeness. Humility draws us nearer to God because it removes the barriers of pride and self-reliance. When the heart bows, worship becomes true. Through humility, worship transforms from performance into relationship. The worshiper is no longer trying to impress God, but simply to honor him. And in that surrender, peace and clarity begin to grow. Chapter 5. Worship is expressed through obedience. Jesus made it clear that worship is not complete if it remains only in words. True worship is revealed through obedience. To honor God sincerely is to align our actions with his will. Worship spoken without obedience lived is incomplete and fragile. Obedience, as Jesus taught it, is not mechanical or forced. It is the natural expression of love and trust. When we obey God, we demonstrate that we believe his ways lead to life. Obedience becomes worship in motion. Faith translated into action. Jesus lived a life of complete obedience to the Father. Every choice, every action, every response reflected in his devotion. Even when obedience led to difficulty or sacrifice, he remained faithful. This shows us that obedience is not conditional on comfort. It is rooted in commitment. Through obedience, worship moves beyond moments and becomes a lifestyle. Choosing forgiveness instead of resentment, choosing honesty instead of convenience, choosing love instead of fear. Each of these decisions becomes an offering placed before God. Worship is no longer confined to prayer. It is woven into daily life. Obedience also deepens worship by building trust. As we follow God's direction, we experience His faithfulness. This strengthens faith and reinforces devotion. Worship becomes steadier, no longer dependent on emotion, but grounded in lived experience. Jesus taught that obedience reveals where the heart truly rests. When obedience flows naturally, it shows that worship is genuine. When obedience is resisted, it reveals areas where surrender is still needed. In this way, obedience becomes both expression and examination of worship. True worship, then, is not passive admiration. It is active faithfulness. It is choosing God's way again and again. And through consistent obedience, worship shapes character, strengthens faith, and draws the worshiper closer to God. Chapter 6. Worship continues even in suffering. One of the deepest truths Jesus revealed about worship is that it does not disappear when suffering begins. Many people believe worship belongs only to moments of peace, joy, and spiritual comfort. They associate worship with songs, gratitude, and blessings. But Jesus taught something far more profound. True worship remains steady even when life becomes painful, confusing, and unfair. Jesus himself worshiped the Father while walking through rejection, loneliness, and sorrow. He did not pause his devotion when suffering appeared. Instead, his trust in the Father became clearer and stronger. This teaches us that worship is not the absence of pain. It is faith that endures within pain. It is the choice to trust God even when understanding is incomplete and relief is delayed. In seasons of suffering, worship often changes its form. Words may feel heavy, songs may feel distant, emotions may feel numb. Yet worship does not vanish. It becomes quieter, deeper, and more internal. It shows itself through endurance, through obedience when comfort is gone, and through faith that refuses to let go of God. This kind of worship is not driven by emotion, it is anchored in trust. Jesus showed that worship during suffering strips away shallow devotion. When blessings are removed, motives are revealed. Pain exposes whether faith was rooted in convenience or in truth. Those who continue to honor God in hardship demonstrate a worship that is mature and genuine. They declare that God is worthy, not because life is easy, but because He is faithful. Worship in suffering also reshapes perspective. Pain no longer defines identity. Circumstances no longer hold ultimate authority. God remains at the center. Through worship, suffering becomes a place of refinement rather than defeat. The heart grows deeper, faith becomes stronger, and trust matures. Jesus teaches us that suffering is not a barrier to worship. It is often the place where worship becomes most real, and in that place, God draws especially near. Chapter 7. Worship is not for attention. Jesus repeatedly warned that worship can easily lose its purity when it becomes a performance. He understood how subtle the human desire for recognition can be, even in spiritual matters. When worship shifts from honoring God to impressing others, its focus changes. And in that moment, worship begins to lose its truth. Many people appear devoted on the outside. Their words sound holy. Their actions look righteous. Yet Jesus exposed a dangerous reality. Worship that seeks attention may look spiritual, but it is empty at its core. True worship is never about being seen. It is about being surrendered. Jesus taught that God sees what happens in secret. He listens not for volume, but for sincerity. Worship offered quietly, without an audience, carries great weight before God because it reveals the true intention of the heart. When no one is watching, motives are exposed. Devotion becomes honest. Worship that does not seek attention shapes character in powerful ways. It forms integrity when applause is absent. It builds faith that does not depend on encouragement or validation from others. This kind of worship creates a deep inner life, one that remains steady regardless of public recognition. Jesus himself lived with this quiet devotion. Even when crowds followed him, his worship was directed entirely toward the Father. He did not measure faithfulness by popularity. He did not allow public response to shape his obedience. His worship remained pure because it was rooted in relationship not reputation. When worship is no longer performed, it becomes freeing. The pressure to appear spiritual disappears. The need to impress fades. In its place comes authenticity, a sincere offering of the heart to God. Worship becomes less about image and more about alignment. Jesus teaches us that worship offered for attention receives only temporary reward, but worship offered in truth receives something far greater: intimacy with God, and that intimacy sustains the soul in ways that recognition never could. When we release the desire to be seen, worship becomes real. And when worship becomes real, it shapes who we are, not just what others see. Chapter 8. Worship aligns our will with God's will. One of the most transformative effects of true worship is the way it reshapes the human will. Jesus revealed that worship is not simply an expression of devotion, it is a process of alignment. When a person truly worships God, their desires, priorities, and intentions begin to shift. Worship gently moves the heart away from self-centered ambition and toward trust in God's purpose. Jesus lived in complete alignment with the Father's will, and this alignment was sustained through worship. He did not worship to escape responsibility or difficulty. He worshiped to remain centered in God's truth. Through worship, his will was continually surrendered, refined, and strengthened. This shows us that worship is not about bending God's will to our desires, but about shaping our desires to reflect his wisdom. Human will often resist surrender. We want control, we want certainty, we want outcomes that favor comfort and security. But worship invites us into a deeper posture: trust. As we worship, we acknowledge that God's perspective is higher than ours. We begin to loosen our grip on control and allow God's purpose to take precedence. This alignment does not happen instantly. It unfolds slowly as worship becomes consistent. Over time, the heart becomes less reactive and more receptive. Decisions are no longer driven solely by fear or impulse, but by discernment and faith. Worship quiets inner conflict and replaces resistance with peace. Jesus demonstrated that aligning with God's will does not remove hardship, but it provides clarity within hardship. When the will is aligned, obedience becomes purposeful rather than burdensome. Surrender becomes strength rather than weakness. Worship becomes the space where trust is renewed again and again. As our will aligns with ours, we begin to desire what leads to life rather than what offers temporary satisfaction. Our prayers change. Our expectations mature. Our faith deepens. Worship becomes the foundation for wise choices and steady faith. Jesus teaches us that worship is not passive. It is active alignment. It is the daily decision to place God's will above our own, and in doing so, we discover peace, direction, and spiritual stability that cannot be found elsewhere. Chapter 9. Worship is a daily way of life. Jesus taught that worship is not confined to sacred moments or religious settings. It is not something practiced only at certain times of the day or week. True worship, as Jesus revealed, is a daily posture of the heart, a way of living that continually places God at the center of every aspect of life. Many people separate worship from ordinary routines. They worship during prayer, during songs, or during moments of reflection, but then return to daily life as if God were no longer present. Jesus challenged this division. He lived with constant awareness of the Father, allowing worship to shape not just moments, but every decision and action. When worship becomes a way of life, daily activities take on deeper meaning. Work becomes an offering rather than a burden. Relationships become spaces for patience, grace, and love. Even rest becomes worship when it is received with gratitude and trust. Nothing is too small or too ordinary to be offered to God. Jesus demonstrated this daily worship through consistent obedience and intentional living. He treated every interaction as meaningful. He listened attentively, served compassionately, and responded faithfully. His life showed that worship is expressed not only in words, but in character. Integrity, kindness, humility, and faithfulness become visible signs of devotion. Living a life of worship requires awareness. It invites us to ask not only what am I doing, but who am I honoring? Worship becomes the lens through which choices are made. When this awareness grows, faith becomes steady rather than occasional. Devotion becomes consistent rather than emotional. Daily worship also brings balance. It removes the pressure to feel spiritual at all times. Instead, it invites faithfulness in small, unseen moments. Worship becomes less about intensity and more about consistency. It is not measured by emotional highs, but by steady commitment. Jesus teaches us that when worship becomes daily, life becomes unified. There is no separation between sacred and ordinary. Everything is lived before God. And in this integrated life, worship becomes natural, sincere, and transformative. When worship shapes daily living, faith is no longer something we visit. It becomes the place where we dwell. Chapter 10. True worship transforms the worshiper. Jesus taught that worship is never neutral. It does not leave a person unchanged. While worship does not alter who God is, it profoundly transforms the one who offers it. True worship reshapes the heart, renews the mind, and gradually reorients life toward what is eternal rather than temporary. When a person worships in spirit and truth, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. Priorities shift, desires are refined. The constant pull of fear, pride, and self-centered ambition begins to lose its grip. Worship creates space for God to work within the inner life, shaping character from the inside out. Jesus himself reflected this transformation. His life revealed clarity, peace, and unwavering purpose, not because circumstances were easy, but because his heart remained aligned with the Father. Worship sustained his strength, sharpened his focus, and grounded his identity. Through worship, his life became a living testimony of trust and obedience. True worship produces inner stability. When external conditions change, the worshiper remains rooted. Fear gives way to confidence in God. Restlessness is replaced by peace. Confusion is met with trust. Worship anchors the soul, allowing faith to endure without being shaken by uncertainty. Transformation through worship is not instant. It unfolds gradually as worship becomes consistent. Over time, patterns of thought are renewed. Reactions soften, love grows deeper. The worshiper becomes more patient, more compassionate, and more discerning. Worship shapes not only what we believe, but how we live. Jesus showed that worship also restores perspective. It reminds us that life is not centered on personal success or comfort, but on faithfulness to God. As this perspective deepens, the worshiper begins to reflect God's character more clearly. Humility replaces arrogance. Gratitude replaces entitlement. Trust replaces control. Ultimately, worship transforms the worshiper by drawing them closer to God. And in that closeness, identity is strengthened, purpose is clarified, and faith becomes resilient. Worship is not an escape from life. It is the means by which life is redeemed and reordered. Jesus teaches us that when worship becomes genuine and continual, transformation is inevitable. The heart is changed, the life is reshaped, and the worshiper becomes a living reflection of the one they honor. Closing true worship is not measured by sound, place, or appearance. It is measured by surrender. When your heart is aligned with God, when your will yields to his wisdom, when your daily life reflects obedience, humility, and trust, you are worshiping. Worship is not something you step into for a moment and then leave behind. It is a way of living before God, a quiet offering of the heart, a continual turning toward truth. As worship becomes genuine and consistent, it reshapes who you are. Your fears loosen, your faith deepens. Your life begins to reflect the character of the one you honor. As you continue this 100-day journey, may worship move beyond words and songs and become the foundation of how you live, choose, and love each day. See you next topic.